begin with a few questions. How many guys like skiing or snowboarding? How many guys like driving over speed? I believe many of you guys will answer yes because I have a bunch of friends did. Maybe it's a little hard to connect friction with our daily life, but I guess many of you guys had experiences the driving in the snow during the winter since we are in Idaho. Let me share a real story here. Last year we had a snowy spring here in Pocatello. Well, my friend and I lived in the top of the mountain at the time. In a snowy morning, when my friend drove her car down to the hill for classes, and when she turned to this corner in ICU, her car slid to the oncoming lane and made a big turn. Fortunately, she was safe, but her story scared me and may scare you. Try to think about it. If her tires has more friction to the ground, the horrible thing may not happen to her. I'm Yunong. I like physics since I was in high school. When I was a high school student, my instructor gave us many examples, and our textbook has many details to the friction part. Also, I took physics class in ICU as well my journals before, so I'm the right person to talk about the friction. Today I have three parts of my presentation. First, I'll talk about what friction is. Second, I'll break friction into static friction and kinetic friction. Third, I'll identify static friction with kinetic friction. Let's start with definition. What is friction? Friction is a force applies to surface of objects. It appears when multiple objects moving over each other or trying to move over each other. Also, friction have opposite direction of objects' target moving direction. For example, when we are pushing something like this, you can feel there always have something against you. The something is friction, and it was truly against you. There is a formula for friction. It is F equals mu multiples N. F is friction, mu is the coefficient of friction, N is a normal force applied to the surface. Different objects has different coefficient of friction. The coefficient of friction is smaller with a smooth surface. We can feel that glasses or ice has smaller coefficients of friction than rubber floor always. For example, rubber floor always appear to the skiing rink. Rubber floor supports people to walk as normal, and skating rink supports people to skating as normal. People always change friction for better life, such as changing to the winter tires and forming ice surface of the skating rink. So right now, let's narrow friction down to more details. There are two main types of the friction. They are static friction and kinetic friction. Static friction keeps objects at rest. For example, everything affected by gravity for all the time. If I'm holding a water bottle like this, the static friction between my fingers and the water bottle equals the bottle's gravity. So the friction saves the bottle from crashing to the ground. However, if I open my hand and hold the bottle in this way, the bottle is still at rest, and I still provide a force against the bottle's gravity, but it's not static friction because the force doesn't apply to the surface, which means the coefficient of the friction didn't evolve in. Kinetic friction keeps reducing speed among the moving objects. A typical example is skiing, and another example will apply if you're trying to stop a speedy car for an emergency. The brake wheel blocks tires from rolling. The kinetic friction between tires and the ground keep reducing speed of the car. So as a result, it will cause the black imprints on the road. However, moving an object with wheel will not be considered as a kinetic friction. Obviously, there are some differences between static friction and kinetic friction. Again, when we are pushing an object, it will take some time for us of start pushing something and start slipping something. The moment that you start slipping the object is the time the static friction switching to the kinetic friction. So no matter how large or how heavy the object is, it always has a process of switching static friction to kinetic friction. However, if we are pushing the same object on the same floor, the kinetic friction will stay for the same for always, but the static friction can be large or small in a range, and the range is from the maximal static friction to 0. Static friction and kinetic friction are really close friends in our daily life. Let's see what we had about them today in my presentation. Today I introduced the force of friction. First, I introduced the general definition of friction. Second, I narrowed down friction into two parts, and they are static friction and kinetic friction. Last, I identified static friction with kinetic friction. Now, might help you imagine if we are living in a friction-free world. Can you imagine how skiing or snowboarding will like? Can you imagine how driving will like? Without friction, we may not be able to put our pants on, or we need to avoid to slip and fall for all the time. Now you know how friction works, and I think you will believe friction is extremely important for us in our daily life. Thanks for listening.